Hey everybody, welcome back to Bayou Time. We're talking Sounding Joy and a big choral event that's happening Wednesday night in Thibodaux at Nicholls State Theater. The Mary and Al Danos Theater in the Talbot Hall is where it's going to happen. 7:10, there's going to be a lecture talking about female composers, and then again we'll have a nice concert going on at 7:30. Aaron Tomplay is the Nicholls Choir president and recently received Nicholls American Choral Directors Association Award for vocal music education. And Dr. John St. Marie, he is, of course, a professor, assistant professor of music at Nicholls, the director of the choral activity. So, guys, thanks for being here. Looking forward to a great night. And just maybe, Aaron, talk a little bit about the difference. Is there any difference between a female composer and a male composer?
Well, I think there's several differences in the way that they see the world. It's more or less about their personalities and actually giving them a chance to be on the forefront of music. I mean, everybody hears about Mozart and Beethoven and their works and things like that, but how often do you hear the names of these women composers? Alice Parker, who composed for years, I mean, she's 96 years old, and I never heard about her until this concert idea from Dr. St. Marie. So just having the opportunity to sing these women's music and giving them a space in the repertoire that we know of is brilliant. And as far as differences, I mean, unless you would know, I guess there isn't too much of a musical difference, but knowing their backgrounds and what they've gone through and how sensitive they are with the poetry, I think is one of the main differences that I've noticed in terms of the repertoire that I've sung.
It doesn't sound so much different, right? I mean, do they on a different scale or anything like that?
No, they use the same tonality. The difference is I think music is a very personal feeling, and so music is supposed to uplift the words, and I think how the composer feels and interprets words certainly comes out in the tone and timbre of the music. And I think these women composers really grasp on a deep level the importance of words, the importance specifically, I think, of joy. These topics are not typically male-driven narratives that you might hear in a particular piece. But for example, we're doing two pieces by Eleanor Daly. One is from her Requiem and the other one is called For the Fallen. Both poems are talking about death and loss. And there's such a joy that you can actually kind of physically hear in the music. And of course, those topics are not typically considered joyful, but I think it's about seeing the hope, and that specifically comes from a female perspective. And it's just, I think they're two of the most beautiful pieces on the program. Alice Parker, who was a woman, she was a trailblazer in her time. In 1960, she started composing with Robert Shaw. And Robert Shaw was a big name in choral music and basically gave her start as a composer. But in order to do that, she had to put his name on all of her music.
I got you.
So it's all arranged by Alice Parker and Robert Shaw. But I've chosen two pieces by her on this program that don't have his name, that are her later works that have a completely different voice.
Right.
And they're quite beautiful, very different. In fact, you can't even find a recording of some of the music. It's how rare it's done.
Well, we were talking earlier, and it seemed like, composers, women composers, go back to year 1000, right?
Yeah.
And you're talking about with the church, and then almost go silent until the 1960s. And what's the reason for that, you think?
Well, we have a few examples from the 1700s and the 1800s, but it's very few and far between. During the 17 and 1800s, women actually studied music more than men. It was considered something that would make you more valuable as a mate for marriage. So women really got into the arts. But in terms of composing, very few did. We finally, in the 1960s, with women like Alice Parker, begin to see women's voices. And I think young girls got to see that there are women composers in a typically male-dominated profession.
So role models, right?
Exactly.
And that I can do this, right? So it's good. So Aaron, tell me a little bit more about what will we learn. We have a lecture. We have a couple of groups that'll be there. Will we learn on every piece where these musical compositions come from?
Yes, actually, at the pre-talk is mostly going to be about our organizations in the area, but during the concert, we actually have students that are going to present about each composer. So they've prepared their own little speech about the history of that person's life and what kind of things you might hear in the piece. And so I think it's brilliant that we have students who are willing to research these women and actually present them on the concert in between pieces. So you're going to learn a lot about who these women were and what's influenced the sounds in their music and how we can start involving them more in today's repertoire.
Yeah, well, when he hit April, we're not going to just do away with women's composition, right? This is a year-round thing, obviously, is to bring awareness to Women's History Month, but it's also not a man-hating thing, right? We're
No, of course not.
In fact, it's come so far that we have young women composers
Sure.
who are now on the forefront and well sought after. So I think it's good for us to see how far it's come and only upward projection in terms of participation for everyone.
Oh no, always. So let's talk. Let's wrap it up again. It'll be about 7:10 at Talbot Hall in the Danos Theater. That'll be the lectures. We'll do that, and then later on at 7:30, it'll be a night of music. How long is the music going?
Just under an hour.
Under an hour. So looking for a great night. So Aaron, thank you. Dr. John, St. Marie, thank you guys so much for being here. We're talking about the Sounding Joy. That's Nicholls State University's choir is presenting Sounding Joy. It's a celebration of women's composers. It's Wednesday. It'll be March 30th. At 7:30, but there'll be some cool stuff, and we're here to talk about it. Before then, around 7:10 or so, there are going to be some talks and presentations and all that. And Dr. John St. Marie is here, the director of choral activities an assistant professor of music at Nicholls, and Aaron Tompley, who's Nicholls Choir president and recently received the Nicholls American Choir Directors Awards. Thank you so much. Sorry, I had to read and had to get through. I wanted to do that. But Sounding Joy, so cool, a great idea. It's going along with Women's History Month. Right at the end, we're getting it in right at the end. But so cool. So why the need to do this, Don?
Well, I started planning this program about a year ago. I've done programs kind of similar in the past. Women composers are very underrepresented. In fact, if you've done choral music for quite a long time, you'll find you run across a woman's composition very rarely. And so about 2016, I had the idea to put together a women's concert, and I loved the music so much and wondered why I had never sung these pieces before, having sung for 25 years in Los Angeles. And so it was a very, I think, eye-opening experience for me to find purposefully women composers and bring their music to the forefront. And then a couple years later, I noticed that other organizations were kind of doing the same thing. And so I feel like I was on the front edge of that, but I'm sure other people and other organizations have highlighted and spotlighted women in many facets. But this was just a way to do it in the choral world and to share their music.
Awesome. And I want to ask you a couple more follow-ups on that. But Aaron, let me ask you, let me get you to talk a little bit about what we're going to see on Wednesday night.
Sure.
Tell me about the program.
So our program consists of about 6 or 7 women, and we have a couple of selections that are actually like pieces from Gwyneth Walker, for example. We have a few of her pieces, I think maybe 3. And so it's a pretty diverse concert in terms of what type of repertoire we have. We have a couple of lyrical pieces and a couple of really like unusual pieces like We Reach, which is a little bit more dramatic in terms of its sounds. And overall, just a lot of joyous music. That's, I guess, why you decided to name it Sounding Joy. But overall, there's such happiness in the sound that these women create, And I think it's really important that their works are being shared.
Yeah. So we talked a little bit. It's going to be at 7:10. You're going to have a lecture first.
Yes.
So what's that going to entail?
So we have the Southern Bells coming to speak about their organization. If I'm not mistaken, they are prominent in Thibodaux and Houma, and they do a lot of work for the community. Carrie Boudreau told me, she's the vice president of the Southern Bells. She told me a lot about their projects, and I was inspired to have her speak on the first half of our concert, or before our concert. And she told me about the work that they do in the jails and helping women get out of situations that they were in, and just lifting them up so that they can re-enter society in ways that they hadn't been able to before. So there's that, and then we also have SAI, who is going to present at 7:10, and they're also going to sing. It's our women's fraternity on Nicholls campus. They are the Theta Theta chapter, and we have a couple other chapters around as well, but they lift women up in music from the college standpoint. So just introducing them to who are the founders and things like that is probably what they're going to be talking about.
No, that's great. Dr. John, let's talk a little bit about, I'm like, why don't we have more women composers? And we've had them historically, but there's been a big gap.
Actually, I teach the music history classes, and one of the first named composers that I talk about is a woman. Her name's Hildegard von Bingen, and she was a mystic and somebody probably who had visions and spoke God. She actually was an advisor to the Pope of the time. That's how highly regarded she was. But she was dedicated to the convent from an early age. Like she took her vows at 13, and she began composing for her convent. And she then later became the Mother Superior at a very young age for a nun. And her music is very distinctive, and it varies greatly. It's a wildly what we call melismatic, which means the notes move around. She doesn't stick to the normal tones or chant lines, because of course all the music composed around this time is for the Catholic Church and chant. But her pieces are very interesting. She wrote a liturgical drama that was all about these 13 virtues, all played by women. And the only man in the entire drama, hour-long drama, was Satan, who was not allowed to sing.
Sounds like today's version.
And he was not allowed to sing because singing was considered a beautiful art. And so his whole role was screamed. But she's a great role model for the early church, but we don't really have that many representative women composers. It's not something that basically entered the mainstream or that women were allowed or encouraged to do.
Yeah, so again, it's composing, right? So a man can sing, right?
Sure.
Doesn't have to scream. So you may have a man that's in the chorus that will also sing.
Of course.
Absolutely.
Right.
We will
So
have
this is a
women and
composer's.
men on this.
All right, we got more questions ahead.
Sure.
We'll take a break. We'll be right back with more Body Time right after this.